Today's video is brought to you by our friends over at ExpressVPN, ladies and gentlemen. Now, one of the reasons why I use this is for IP obfuscation. Ladies and gentlemen, with a ton of servers to pick from with pretty fast speeds, the reason why I pretend to be from other parts of the world is when you're browsing things on the dark web, or, God forbid, you're on the ClearNet going to that shady site. Ladies and gentlemen, they can store your IP address, especially when it comes to playing peer-to-peer video games where IPs are shared around. As somebody who occasionally live streams, the last thing I want is somebody picking up my, unfortunately, static IP address and DDoSing me out of the sky. But of course, ladies and gentlemen, one of the big reasons is no-log technology. You've probably seen me talk about this a lot, especially when it comes to ExpressVPN, but them and various third-party audit services have confirmed, of course, that they are using something known as trusted server technology. For somebody that has no idea what trusted server technology is, trusted server technology basically means that their servers operate in RAM instead of running off of a hard drive cache. That said, if you want to experience all these benefits and get 3 months free, please go check out expressvpn.com/SOG. That said, let's get to the video. Linux, virtual machines, these are things that you all know me for, ladies and gentlemen. If you've been a long-time viewer of the channel, you know that I have a healthy obsession with virtualizing everything on my system. And it's not because I'm paranoid, it's because I don't like when big companies like Microsoft are just running willy-nilly, running my computer. I also don't like it when gaming companies install drivers on my system that are so invasive that I have to question, is it all worth it just to play a little bit of Call of Duty online? Ladies and gentlemen, virtualization is great for me because I can basically separate all the nastiness from my core computer all within a couple clicks on my system. Now, I wish most companies looked at it the way I did, but unfortunately, that's not the case. Now, to understand, I'm a huge Linux user on my platform, and one of the things is, most of my gaming nowadays is done underneath Linux. If you've been playing the Steam Deck, congratulations, we're Linux gamers as well. See, at this moment in time, Linux gaming has gotten so good that I really don't use Windows other than for just playing 3 games right now. One of them being Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, sadly. One of them is Cyberpunk 2077, Phantom Liberty, and Alan Wake 2. To understand why I played those 2 games in a virtual machine, it's because the graphic settings are so good on those games that you can enable things like path tracing, which makes the ray tracing go insanely on crack. It makes the actual visuals so worth it to the point where enabling these features, I can actually tell a difference in lighting, reflections, so on and so forth. It makes games like Cyberpunk 2077 even more immersive than they actually are. And it puts them at a night and day difference between playing them on a standard console like the Xbox Series X, the PlayStation 5, and a tricked out PC. The problem is, these feature sets require some serious assists to run. Without me using a lot of the DLSS features that NVIDIA provides, this game runs at like 30 frames per second on a 4090. To give you an idea, the graphic settings that I'm using are so heavy that they absolutely drop the highest grade graphics card on the market to its knees. So what does NVIDIA do? They release something known as DLSS frame generation. So alongside running the game at a smaller resolution and upscaling it while it looks pretty close to native, they have a frame duplication technology. So when I'm getting 30 frames, enabling DLSS and having enough CPU headroom, I can actually play the game at up to 60 frames or beyond. It makes playing this game actually playable underneath this system. Yeah, I have to deal with some input lag, but you know what? To be honest, I'm surprised the input lag is as good as it is, because I played 52 hours of this game underneath these graphic settings, and I am absolutely loving it. But to understand, ladies and gentlemen, this is a very specific case. These graphic settings only exist in Windows. Yeah, we're sitting at a point where graphic settings and technologies are locked to operating systems. Now, there are some vendors like AMD that absolutely go out of their way to make sure everything is agnostic, meaning that if you were playing on Linux, Windows, fuck it, Mac at this point, you may actually have the opportunity to enable some of these cool features. Maybe they're not as good as NVIDIA, but they run across the board. So, ladies and gentlemen, quick recap here. Linux gaming is great. Aside from a few very specific rare case technologies like frame generation, a lot of games run day one out of the box underneath Linux. It's actually so easy that you can have any distribution right now. All you have to do is fire up Steam as of here, go to your gaming library, and basically any game that you find here, for instance, Lethal Company, great game. Right-click, properties, compatibilities. You can force specific Proton compatibility tools, which is what Valve's special sauce is. See, a lot of games don't run on Linux because they're not natively made for it. These are just Windows games that Steam downloads, and it runs through their version of Proton, which is a compatibility layer that allows you to play Windows games on Linux in real time.
Guys, there's got to be something in here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, careful! They're careful.
So.
Well. Well, boys. Hey. All right.
Holy
Fuck
shit.
my asshole.
Holy shit.
By hitting this green play button, it'll launch Valve's version of Proton, their compatibility layer, and you can play Windows games on PC. Now, this has went through so many advancements over the last few years. I can tell you right now, a couple of years ago, we couldn't even get DLSS working. Now we've got DLSS working, we've got ray tracing working. The only thing that doesn't work is that frame generation. I would play Cyberpunk 2077 underneath Linux. The problem is, I like to play over 30 frames per second if I can. If that one specific technology could work underneath Proton, that would make the only game I ever play underneath virtual machines where I need Windows is Call of Duty. And that's for a very specific reason, and it's one of the reasons why this video is titled the way that it is. I am willing to have my accounts banned. Now, a while back, I made a video in regards to me and BattlEye, Valorant, a lot of these big anti-cheats that were starting to crack down on virtual machines. For the longest time, I used to play games like Rainbow Six Siege. I don't anymore, because honestly, I have basically been kicked from it. To understand my setup, my system, I needed to use a virtual machine to play games like Rainbow Six Siege because the anti-cheat would basically not work underneath Linux. It's not that anti-cheat doesn't work underneath Linux. There are anti-cheats that do. For instance, Halo Infinite and Apex Legends both now run underneath Linux. If you have a Steam Deck, you can install Apex Legends or Halo Infinite right now and play those games online with other players. You cannot play games like Rainbow Six Siege or Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 because some of the drivers in anti-cheat technologies are currently incompatible with Linux. Now, again, I have seen my name thrown on Ubisoft's forums. I have seen Ubisoft forum members begging for Valve to flip us, or not Valve, Ubisoft to flip a switch and allow Rainbow Six Siege. But so far, they have not. And that's one of the reasons why I used a virtual machine so I could install Windows under it and then play Siege. And for a while, that worked really well until it didn't. So today, I'm going to walk you through a few steps that allow me to bypass this and run these games even if these anti-cheat technologies don't fucking want me to. Now, before we continue, I'm sure some people are going to be like, but Muda, don't you lose a lot of frames when you game in a VM? Yes, you do have a performance loss. But as I'm going to show you, playing a game like Cyberpunk 2077, where I'm able to sit in that 90 to 100 frame range, yes, I am losing frames. But there are a lot of assists with virtualization technology that make it so that these performance penalties don't really feel, you don't really feel them as you're playing. For instance, I can play Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 at 150 to 200 frames per second. Could I do better if I was running bare metal Windows? Probably. But is the gain that noticeable? Probably not. So when it comes to VR chat, when they're showcasing how to actually bypass or run their software in a virtual machine, because they use Easy Anti-Cheat, an anti-cheat that bans virtual machines now, that should be a dead giveaway that the virtual machine gamers aren't the biggest threats in the world. But we'll get to that in a bit. So they showcase how to enable Hyper-V enlightenments. Hyper-V, for those of you who don't know, I showcased as a way to bypass the Valorant anti-cheat. So Vanguard, at the time when I recorded, if you enabled Microsoft's Hyper-V, which was Microsoft's own virtualization platform, a lot of professionals use it, what it would do is it would basically create a virtualization container and it would virtualize Windows underneath Hyper-V. So as soon as you enabled Hyper-V, your Windows installation was basically running underneath a virtualized container. And so for a lot of these anti-cheats, it was, do we ban Hyper-V? Or a lot of these anti-cheats could have their detection bypassed. The second benefit of doing this was if you were virtualizing like I do with QEMU and Linux, you would basically replace some of those Linux assists with Microsoft assists where applicable. And this would basically increase your performance piecemeal in special areas, basically depending on your setup or your whatnot. So according to them, by enabling Hyper-V, I could pass through basically whatever enlightenments I wanted to, assists. And also they were teaching you how to basically introduce or spoof your hardware IDs. So for instance, this is information that you can obtain from your system. So by entering something known as DMI decode, I was able to obtain all this information from my system's baseboard. By using this information, I could basically spoof it into my virtualized machine, and basically I could hide myself from these anti-cheats to a reasonable extent. Remember, you will never 100% hide yourself. You can only do a reasonably good job. Now this screen right here that you're seeing is the QEMU virtualization script, okay? So to understand, this is a Windows 11 virtual machine that I use to play those 3 games on. And by going into this, specifically the entries where I'm talking about Hyper-V, I passed through so many of these assists like Relax State, Vapic State, Spin Lock State, VP Index, Runtime, Synic, S-Timer, Reset, Vendor, Frequencies, Re-Enlightenment, TLB Flush, IPI, EVMCS. This, for anybody watching, is basically throwing the entire medicine cabinet of assists at the problem known as anti-cheat, okay? And of course, these are just a few assists that I passed through. Also, there's other assists where I change the clock speed to match my system's clock, and then of course I pass through extra assists like NVTSC and TopoX just because I'm on an AMD processor. So the result of all this word salad and computer assist technology is this virtual machine is now not getting banned by any anti-cheat except Valorant, because Valorant's anti-cheat is insanely good. But again, we'll get to a lot of that in a second. So what this has let me do is allow me to play these multiplayer games yet again. But again, this is a constant cat and mouse game. See, at the end of the day, getting banned is just an inevitability for me. And at this moment in time, whether I play games like Rainbow Six Siege, where I spend hundreds of dollars of, I actually don't mind getting banned in. For years, we have begged Ubisoft to allow basic Linux support underneath their system, just so us Linux gamers, which granted there aren't a lot of, I think maximum we sit at like 1% to 2% of the computer PC market space, we're not clearly any massive group to care about. But we have begged time and time again for Ubisoft to flip a switch and allow Linux gamers. They have not, so this is the only way for Linux users to play this game. Now you might be wondering, after all this, why not just install fucking Windows? See, the reality of it is, ladies and gentlemen, my beef isn't just with Windows in this situation, it's with the entirety of anti-cheat software. Now, a lot of companies do their damnedest to fight cheaters. For instance, Call of Duty, Activision is actually suing companies like the cheat maker Engine Owning, just because they were trafficking in circumvention devices, and basically they were actually causing harm to the company. Because anytime a cheater exists, there are probably players that quit playing video games entirely, and that means money lost for Activision. When you get in between Bobby Kotick and his fucking money, yeah, you bet lawyers are getting involved. But of course, anti-cheat has been basically brought in by tons of video games out there. For instance, Easy Anti-Cheat powers all of the games that you're seeing right now. BattlEye is powering all these games that you're seeing right now. And of course, Valorant, which has Vanguard, is probably one of the best anti-cheats on the market. And this is the one where I guess a lot of gamers really learned about, Ring 0 drivers, kernel drivers, which run at the highest elevated permissions on your system. Now, as somebody that advocates privacy and computer security, you can imagine why I'm not comfortable with a video game. Remember, this is a video game It's something for you to relax and enjoy for maybe an hour of your day. If that is running at the highest elevated permissions just to ensure a fair game, then for me, it's not worth playing that game, and I can just go play something else, right? That's where I kind of come into. Obviously, some gamers who love these type of things disagree. See, my stance means that I can't play basically 90% of multiplayer games out there on the market unless I, by technicality, am kind of violating the rules by using a virtual machine. I have a pretty hardline stance against this, and I think most people should. Call of Duty, which actually introduced Ricochet Anti-Cheat, which was their version of kernel anti-cheat security drivers. Again, these are Ring 0 drivers that are running at the most elevated permission level. And even these drivers don't seem to do a whole heck of a lot at times too. For instance, even according to Valorant, you can see footage online of people using what is known as extrasensory perception hacks, where this scumbag can see all these players and where they are in relation to his distance. So again, this is the most stringent game in terms of security, and it's very good. I gotta give Riot Games credit, but it's still unfortunately bypassed. You have scumbag companies openly advertising on Google, teaching you about extrasensory perception cheats. And if you think Valorant has it bad, Tarkov has it even worse, where their game, I think the ratio is like an insane amount of cheaters to very few legitimate gamers. So yeah, these cheats exist. And unfortunately, they're not going anywhere because these cheats are serious moneymakers for these scumbags. These cheats are being sold by the bucket load. And to give you an idea, it's gotten to the point where these cheats don't even touch video games. See, for these cheats to be detected, usually what'll happen is anti-cheats will look through memories and process and see what actual programs are interacting with the game and what games are fuddling around with memory. But now there exist things like AI aimbots, which don't even touch the game. They just look at a video feed of the game and correct your mouse movements as you pan over other players using artificial intelligence, which again is getting to a point where it's very, very undetectable. A lot of people have the hardware to run this type of software in real time and basically use AI-based anti-cheats. For instance, this one scumbag is advertising an actual anti-cheat on YouTube. It should be removed. This is a violation of YouTube's TOS, where they're showing an AI cheat that as you pan over a player, reduces your mouse movement so you can better aim for heads or the body. And again, these scumbags sell it for 20 bucks a month, 20 euros a month. So again, ladies and gentlemen, these people sell this software, and this is even more dangerous than the anti-cheat software. If you thought the anti-cheat software ran invasive, this software runs even more invasive on your system. Not only that, it comes with its own DRM, and in certain cases can actually cause serious harm to a user. So again, if you're dumb enough to cheat in a video game and also dumb enough to install their crazy software, I kind of don't have sympathy for you getting hacked, but it's a good showcase to teach you that as this cheating software gets so invasive, so does the anti-cheat software. And unfortunately, the average gamer, like me and you, are tossed in the middle of it. We have to have our computers basically be penetrated security-wise just to play video games nowadays. And even for these AI cheats, there's actual AI anti-cheats, which again are designed for looking at video footage and basically discerning if maybe AI was involved in the aiming or maybe it wasn't. Again, I don't understand the point of the software. Usually you want to stop a cheater in real time, not after the cheating has happened, where again, gamers already have quit the game. There are games like The Finals, which recently just had a beta, and they had a very serious cheating situation. So again, that's a game in beta. And again, because of their cheating situation, you can bet the anti-cheats are going to get even more invasive, because that's what you're paying them for. And the reason why I'm against anti-cheat drivers in general is because sometimes, in some cases, they can be used to attack people that don't have any connection to these games. If you remember about a year ago, we looked at a anti-cheat known as myprot2.sys, which was a vulnerable anti-cheat driver for a game known as Genshin Impact. This driver is currently abused by a ransomware actor to kill antivirus processes and services for mass deploying ransomware. Security teams and defenders should note that this could be integrated into any malware. So the general idea is they found a code-signed driver called myprot2.sys, which provides those anti-cheat functions for Genshin Impact. And it was basically being abused to bypass privileges, and basically commands from kernel mode would kill endpoint protection processes. So as of this writing, the code signing for myprot2 is still valid. Genshin Impact does not need to be installed on a victim's device for this to work. The use of this driver is independent of the game. And I've always said it, I don't really disbelieve like anti-cheat manufacturers. I get it. I understand why they have to do it. And I don't think that BattlEye, Easy Anti-Cheat, Riot Games, or any of these companies are actually out there to use their drivers for a nefarious purpose. The problem is they serve a very dangerous supply chain. If there is a bug detected in their drivers, it could be used against a lot of people in a very nefarious manner. Now again, I went on a massive tirade about anti-cheat technologies. And again, this is the crux of why I use virtual machines. See, when I used to play multiplayer games, the problem is giving up my level of safety and security for playing a video game. And I thought virtual machines was a pretty fine compromise against that. Unfortunately, the gaming population and the gaming development space thought that that wasn't a good compromise, which is why virtual machines have been targeted. Can people use the same virtual machine technology that I use to hack video games? Absolutely. But at the same time, I would argue it's a lot easier to use, malcrafted drivers, something of that nature. I would pretty much say that this virtualized gaming setup material that I use is still very, very, very cumbersome for the average hacker to spin up, especially when that same hacker has to be streaming to hundreds of people on the internet, pretending that they're a good player anyways. But yeah, that's really one of the things that I wanted to get at over here, right? Obviously, for me, virtual machines are not just a principle, it's a way for me to keep my core computer safe from the various, kernel level drivers, from the various invasiveness that not just Windows throws at me, but these video games as well. Now, it's kind of fucked up that as somebody that doesn't cheat in online video games, I have to basically be on the same chopping block as a cheater just because the method that I use to play video games is now flagged as suspicious by these actual anti-cheat developers. And I've said this time and time again, what I do isn't necessarily cheating at all. There are actually far easier ways to cheat with video games. And all of this could easily be alleviated if a lot of these multiplayer gaming developers just decided to take the stick out of their ass and enable some of their anti-cheat for Linux software out there. Again, I get that we're 1 to 2% of the population out there in the internet, but Jesus Christ, ladies and gentlemen, as the Steam Deck gets popular, and when Valve finally releases SteamOS to the public, you think people buying any of their handheld PC gaming devices aren't going to be installing SteamOS on there for extra performance, and not to mention the fact that you get a bunch of extra cool features like suspend resume? Yeah, of course people are going to be doing that. And of course, with Valve's effort in this space, they're finally creating the only competition right now to Microsoft Windows. And at this moment in time, I think that a lot of these gaming companies, especially gaming companies that run some of the biggest multiplayer products like Rainbow Six Siege, should probably open up just a little bit, okay? That's all I'm asking. Look, maybe this whole video was me basically trying to beg Ubisoft to finally allow me to play one of my favorite games again on my setup. But yeah, this whole video came out for me basically showing you that virtualization technology is not dead. It's still alive and well. And no matter how many times these companies fight for me to stay on Windows and allow them to invade my computer's privacy and safety, there will always be a method against it. And I wholeheartedly recommend you to always keep yourself safe and never compromise your privacy and your security for any video game company, let alone any piece of software. Even looking at things that I covered back in the day, like proctoring software, where people during COVID were basically doing tests over the internet. They had to install some of the most invasive shit on their computers. And for me to basically show people how to use virtual machines, even the most invasive levels of virtual machines, to bypass that was a civic duty, okay? Because at the end of the day, no software, whether it be a game or anything, should have such invasive hooks into your system. That's unsafe, it's unwarranted, and you should feel totally okay and well within your goddamn right to keep your stuff safe. And this is not too different from the Xbox. When you play the Xbox titles on your Xbox Series X or the Xbox One, those run underneath virtual machines through Hyper-V. So again, it's totally okay for that to happen there, and it works really great. It keeps everything separate. It's actually one of the main reasons why nobody's really hacked the Xbox One or the Series systems. Because even if you can find an exploit in a certain video game, because it's running in a virtual machine, all Microsoft does is crash the VM and force you to reboot. If we could just bring that level of separation, that church and state, over to PC gaming, then I think that would be a fair compromise. In a perfect world, a lot of these games would just have their own separate executable files. They would partition a portion of your GPU, run their games in their own virtualized container, meaning that I couldn't look into their software and they can't look into mine. And by having that separation, playing their video games for an hour would be a total love by me. But ladies and gentlemen, this is me, Mutahar, and if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am out.